Hi there, and welcome to the latest edition of the BD Roundtable. This week we're going to be speaking to our guest, who you can see on screen here, David Sace. He's going to talk to us on when is the right time to build a new website, or when is the right time for building a new website, as she says on the invitation. But I don't know if there's any difference between those two things, David. But knowing you well enough as I do, I think we'll wander through the topic in our own inimitable fashion and bring some kind of thinking to kind of what people might consider. This video, I think, is going to be of use to anyone who's thinking of a new website. It doesn't need to be somebody who's working in professional services necessarily, although it is tailored and aimed towards that audience a bit as well. So if you're new to this session, you haven't seen the BD Roundtable previously, then please do sign up. If you're watching this on YouTube, you actually get more juice if you join the club. It's free, but what you get is you get to join in all of the Q&A section, which happens kind of after this initial video, and that's in the secret squirrel club that we've got signed off. But for this main video, for the next 20-25 minutes or so, I'm going to ask David some questions in relation to the main topic, have a chat about that, and then yeah, we hope you enjoy it. There'll be a link to go with the video as well as to where to sign up and join the gang as well. So David, maybe you could start out by giving us a quick introduction to yourself, what you do, yeah, where you work, those kind of bits. That'd be great.
That sounds good. So yes, I'm David Sace. I am director of Paper Gecko. I'm a SEO and digital marketing consultant, and I work predominantly through professional services and a lot of the B2B businesses. Not just UK based, some of them are in all sorts of wonderful places around the world. And I really help companies, businesses, firms make the most of their digital. So I was there back in the day when it was firms getting launched with websites, sorting out their email marketing and all the rest of it. And very much now it's moved into that, where is the next step? And helping them understand the business side of digital. So understanding what are the meaningful KPIs, how can we get the most out of what we do and deliver it in a way to our prospective clients that will enable them to take action.
That's brilliant. I love that introduction. Maybe a question that I hadn't kind of flagged up I was going to ask, but do you think there's been a huge change in terms of how, such a loaded question, do you think there's been a change in how people approach kind of website digital marketing over the last 18 months? Talk about law firms specifically, but maybe broader professional services.
I think definitely professional services, and yes, I think law firms as well. I think with everything going lockdown, everything going digital, there has been a greater understanding of what that means to clients. I think just everyone jumping on to Zoom calls and webinars and all the rest has led people to think, well, what does our digital ecosystem look like? Is it fit for purpose? And it's interesting, I've been working with a number of the financial services areas as well, where, and you know, these are pretty big names, but it's interesting. Sometimes you look at that front page, the front end of the website, and think everything looks fabulous, and then you dive in a little deeper and realize that, you know, it's not clear sailing behind the scenes. The integration is missing. There's a lot of hard work going on, a lot of quick fixes, and I've seen a lot of businesses looking to improve that, and that does include migrations of the website. It also includes areas such as greater integration between platforms such as Salesforce and Pardot, trying to bring everything together to allow stakeholders to get a good understanding of what is actually happening within the business.
Brilliant. Okay, it sounds like a load of things that we're going to get to cover today, so I'm really excited by the topic. So any headline thoughts on when is the right time to build a new website? Is it well, that sparks a smile on your face immediately, I noticed. So.
It does, because it's the SEO favorite answer of it depends. You know, I think sometimes it's something that businesses do rush into. Right. Limited thought, and there is this thinking that it's going to solve all the problems. It can unfortunately bring more problems to the surface than it solves if it's not done correctly. And I think there's also there's a struggle with the resource side, but when it comes to right time, it's understanding where you are at the moment and thinking where you want to be. And I think that's absolutely key. I mean, we spoke earlier about the issues around legacy systems, and I was having a conversation just before we went live about the usability from the internal side of websites as well. And all of these can lead into either a complete migration or sometimes just subtle changes to help fix those issues. And it's something you need to be very cautious with.
Okay. It sounds like there's a lot to unpack on there. Maybe if we can start out on just in your experience, because I know that you've got a vast amount of experience and I've got a bit, but nothing like yours. How long does it take to run kind of the whole project? And I know that is, it depends how long is a piece of string kind of question, but can you give us some ideas as to, phases and timelines involved for,
I think,
let's say for a top 100 law firm, something like that?
yeah, I think, getting rid of the smallest and largest websites, you're looking at anywhere between 6 to 18 months for the full project. So it's planning, it's pre-launch preparation, pre-launch testing. There's all the stuff that happens on launch day, and that is not the end of it.
No.
A lot of people will be throwing hats in the air going, wow, we've done it, congratulations.
Yeah.
But then there's the review and performance review that has to happen after that as well. Some of the larger migrations I've worked on have been quite convoluted. They've included CMS, branding, domain changes, all the rest of it. And those are definitely at the 18 to 24 month phase, end of the migration period.
Brilliant. So just thinking about that time range, then it's quite a variance between 6 and 18 months. So what's different at the 6 month range? What's happening there that's different to the 18 to 24 month range?
So I think at the smaller end of the scale, you're looking at smaller websites that are perhaps currently pretty well looked after. There's a good understanding of why it's there, how it's working. And maybe the migration itself isn't too drastic as well. What happens is, as you move up the scale, you end up with projects where there's one of the best examples is probably a business I worked with where it was effectively it was 70 odd businesses brought together under a holding company.
Right.
And they'd all been brought together through mergers, acquisitions, and there was a lot of legacy information there, and some of it was still being used, but wasn't perhaps made aware to marketing and IT that it was still happening.
Right.
So this is things like files hidden away on web servers somewhere that were important but not part of the formal structure of the business. So when you move into that sort of 18, 24 month period, you're looking at a firm that is perhaps looking at a major migration. So this could be, as I say, a merger and acquisition, domain name change, structural change, design change. Every single one of these changes as well comes with its own risks and its own issues.
I mean, I've experienced that when we went through the Dewey kind of LaBeouf merger. I know the firm's now kind of gone by the wayside, but I did feel as though the one thing that Sophie and that team had got right on the website things is that they took a double bounce kind of effort towards it. They created a new site and a new domain, and then had always a vision that 18 to 24 months later there would be an additional kind of site. And I thought that, given it was $1 billion law firm, they're bringing together two huge law firms. I didn't think that was the wrong approach necessarily. Any thoughts on that? Does that sound right for a major merger that's announced at 3 weeks' notice?
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah. I will admit I'm sometimes brought in very soon to the fact, or sometimes even worse off after the fact when things have gone wrong. With a lot of the mergers that I've worked on, a lot of the migrations, sorry, I've worked on, you have some element of here's a new version of how it's going to be, and whether that's a new domain or even a staging environment that allows you access. And that actually means that on the day of launch, you're just simply redirecting and opening up that new website. I think, mitigating the risk is always the primary concern at that stage.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen some, because obviously with the digital manager, we do a lot of the analytics of these things as well. We've seen a few sites torched, literally just torched, all good but gone. And I think that brings us into something that I know is really close to your heart as well. I think you've answered it in part, but can you tell us a bit about that planning phase? Like what really goes on in planning? So let's say I'm a CMO, I'm at a top 100 law firm, I'm thinking of doing a website next year, right? I'm thinking about budgeting for next year. What can I do this financial year? What should I be spending that time doing? And I please, can we not say it depends? Because I just want to.
Well, no, I mean, poor planning is probably one of the biggest issues when it comes to a migration, and one of the biggest reasons that they fail. So I think it's making sure all stakeholders are brought in on board at a very early stage. That includes senior teams, it includes people across other departments. Don't forget IT, don't forget HR. Everyone has a stake in the website. And I think the sooner they are brought in to understand that changes are coming, the easier things will be. I think then from the planning side of things, it's about, right, what are we trying to achieve with this? What are the issues that we are thinking this is going to solve? And start having a look at, how much of a migration is this going to be? As I say, there's different types of migration, some much more risky than others. And then, it really is trying to make everyone aware of what sort of timescales you're going to be looking at. And I think in the early stages, being pretty flexible with that. But it really is about, understanding every element that this is going to impact. So don't forget your email marketing, links coming into the website. Is this migration going to have an impact there? Areas such as PPC, URLs that are in publications. All of those need to be taken into consideration.
Yeah.
And then from a technical side, it's about doing a full sweep of that digital ecosystem. So something like a full and comprehensive audit across the website, understanding what pages are there, what pages are absolutely vital to the business, and having a look at some of the more hidden areas. So we've talked about this before about the subdomains.
Yeah.
And, it's easy over the years with people moving between businesses, these get forgotten. One example I had, which I shared earlier with you, was a subdomain for a financial services business, which was important for what they were doing. It held not personally identifiable information, but important information that was used on a regular basis. But the subdomain it was sitting on just wasn't part of what people knew of. It was so hidden away, and I think it appeared in an autoresponder in an email, which probably hadn't been updated in a few years, definitely not within a few personnel changes. So there's real discovery of making sure you know where everything is. This was so far out of the ecosystem. It was a subdomain that was sitting on a totally separate computer in a totally separate part of the country.
I really like that, because I think it takes us on to the next subject, but I want to combine it. So we planned to talk about team, and I know you've mentioned IT, I know you've mentioned HR, I know you've mentioned kind of the other moving parts. I think agency needs to be brought into that element of team as well. But can we, before we go, well, we talked about the kind of team there. Let's talk about that a bit more in a minute. But what about skill set? Because I have a feeling that when these projects kick off, marketing has got a desire to do X, Y, and Z, and IT's is they're not on the same page. They haven't done a project for a few years, and the web agency's way over there somewhere as well. Any thoughts on in that planning phase about what needs to be done to to get people on the same page?
It's exactly that. It's getting everyone on the same page, and that is again, it's a vital part of those first few steps. One of the issues I often find is areas such as SEO being completely forgotten until very close to or post migration. The thought that, oh, we're only doing minor changes can have huge impacts across Google. That's something that needs to be considered. But I think it's, bring those people together as soon as possible, even if it's just over a beer, over a coffee, get people talking, get people being able to work together as well, because that is important. I've been lucky enough, I often sit between the senior stakeholders, marketing, IT agency, and act as that conduit in between when I'm doing my contracts. And I think having an element of that is vital. Somebody who has that wider picture, but can connect those people together and make sure that the language being used is understandable. I've seen big fallouts during migrations between design and developers, complete disagreements and relationships ruined. It just takes some common sense, somebody sitting in the middle to make sure everyone is, as you say, on the same page.
And in that, maybe that hints at the other team member that we haven't included there, which is the kind of UX client team member. And actually, in my experience with law firm website design, if in doubt, then let's just go with what the clients have told us and the UX tells us. I don't know. I feel like in that planning phase, that's a good phase in which to introduce people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, shouldn't underestimate the UX side of things as well, and making sure, this is all part of the planning. What's working now, what isn't working now, what is going to be changes, what do we think the impact, or what do we hope the impact of that change will be?
Yeah.
What is the risk of that change as well? Because, just from the organic side of things, when it comes to search, any change to your website, the search engines are going to be coming in, having a look, noticing a change and thinking, okay, let's reevaluate where you're currently existing in those rankings, what keywords are coming up, how you're performing.
Yeah.
UX is playing more and more a part of that.
I saw a huge drop off from the digital one. I just had things from GWF when they moved. They had a .law extension. Not too many had the GTLD as .law. And when they moved from .law to DWF group instead, .com, dropped 1 million places in Tranco rankings and hit them hard. They've spent their time coming back up there. They've done really well recently. We'll announce the findings shortly as to where they sit at the moment as well. But someone somewhere has made a decision based on, it's just a domain kind of thing here and there. And actually, all of the Google rankings that were kind of related to that domain, they hadn't put in a redirect strategy, clearly, because we just saw it just tumble. And it's not the only one. I mean, I think of an even larger firm than that that's not listed.
There's been a few of those in the last couple of years, and it has been down. The biggest ones have been down to mishandling redirect mapping. So when you change, especially CMS, or you're changing the back end structure, architecture of your website, that URL may well change. And this happens with CMS changes. Sometimes the layout, the format changes. So you have to be very careful of putting in a document that says, well, if you originally went to this page, you now need to go to this one. And you need to be very careful, A, that it's correct, but B, you need to make sure that you're informing the search engines of that change. What we saw happen here was, and I think I don't know if it was the one you mentioned or another one, where it was a whole section of the website that had been missed. I think another one, they had just not redirected and gone with the assumption that Google will sort it out.
Yeah.
They may well do, but it can take a long time. And long time, I'm talking about, it can take a year or so. And for professional services companies they have a reliance on some of that high end ranking. You're in that top 1, 2, 3 position. It may well be that that's bringing in clients, bringing in sales, and all the rest. You lose those positions, they can be very, very difficult to get back.
I agree. I agree. Back to team for a minute. I think that's really interesting. Back to team for a minute. There seems to be, in the nicest possible way, a dearth of really good digital marketing talent. There's a lot of companies out there that want great digital marketing talent. They're going to hire it, and the legal sector is, one of those industries. Those guys, they'll have a side hustle quite often if they're digital marketers.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on the need to hire great digital marketing talent before you get going internally, before you get going on a project like this?
I think for firms that are able to invest, bringing somebody in to specifically look at the digital side of marketing is going to be a big win. I think if you're looking at migration and projects like that, seriously consider consultant, contractor to cover that. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I? But it's that specific knowledge of what's going to happen without the
People assume,
cost.
don't they, that could be something that the agency will handle well for them.
No, not I think we alluded to this before. I struggle with, it's difficult for agencies. You ideally you want somebody who comes in early, gets to know the business, gets to know the people, which
Yeah.
is often something that's forgotten. With agencies, it's very difficult, I think, for them to really embed themselves within the firm. And I think there's always a bit of reluctance of whose best interest is all of this in. So that's why I think, whether it is a consultant, whether it's somebody specifically in house, having somebody that is, or a small team to look specifically after a migration project is vital. Now, in the past, as I say, I mean, I'm often brought in as a consultant, a contractor to look after these periods. And what I would generally try and do is, first of all, start with a steering group. So, senior stakeholders, some key people around the different departments. That's sort of the monthly update or so on what's going on, what needs to happen, keeping everyone up to date, and hoping that they then filter that information through the rest of the business. Closer to the project, you will often then have somebody looking after the project management side, somebody looking after the technical side. You have those people close to the project, and those may well be internal staff that are almost seconded into the project for the entirety of that time. So they leave their general day to day and they work solely on the project. And it's important because the distractions through some of these bigger projects can be devastating for somebody trying to send out the emails and sort out other bits of marketing. Those distractions during a migration can cause a lot of problems. I think the agency then is sitting there and helping advise, but that's one of the better structures that I've seen.
Yeah,
And
I think that governance model works quite well. I
yeah,
do wonder about the role of kind of the anointed kind of marketing partner as well from the firm. I think that has a real potential to disrupt kind of proceedings. It's well intended. It's perfectly well intended.
yeah.
Acts on behalf of the partnership, but I think that if it's not, if you don't choose the right person and the person who's going to make themselves available for the project, it can hinder large tracks of the kind of project as well.
I think it's important to. I mean, this is all part of the planning. It's getting that good understanding
Yeah.
of where you are, where you're going, leaving egos at the table as much as you can, which isn't easy with some firms.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I mean, when I go in, I am me. I don't play the politics. I'm there to make a project successful, and that's what I do. Yes, I tread on a few toes occasionally, but yeah, it's all done for the sake of the project.
Um, I'm going to come back to timelines again in a minute because I just want to revise some thinking that in our heads. But triggers for a new website, just given the kind of thing that we're talking about, it's a subject matter, what are the times, or what's the best time to kind of think about launching a new website? Some of those triggers you've already mentioned: mergers,
Yeah.
acquisitions, obviously, or disposals maybe as well, considering as well if you're, shunting a business off to one side, or a sub brand.
Yeah.
As well. Anything else pop into your head immediately that we need to think about?
I think, for those businesses they probably haven't updated the digital side for a while, running legacy systems.
Yeah.
Um, Migrations are not the be all and end all. Sometimes you can put fixes in place which will solve the problems. Sometimes migrations are put in too soon. But I think with some firms, I've worked with some firms who their legacy systems are 10, 15 years out of date. That really is a trigger for migration. You want to make sure that whatever platform you have in place is usable both sides of the screen. So for those internally who are having to update it, I know I've worked with companies where the frustrations and, more importantly, the time it takes to put in simple updates to a website, we've converted that into money and actually gone back to stakeholders and said, well, since we did this migration, these people, they're getting this work done so much faster. Here's an example of how much that's saving you.
Okay, on those, I agree. So you had, all of those different elements. And then I think you mentioned previously kind of major Google updates.
I mean, probably one of the big ones historically was the move from desktop to desktop mobile. When I first started working with websites, we'd look at Google Analytics and we'd see 2 or 3 screen sizes. That was all we had to deal with, and they were pretty much all the same. These days, if you pull up a similar report, you will see 500 different screen sizes, from the smallest smartphones to these great big 42-inch widescreens. That produced a lot of business for migrations at the time. And I think with areas such as Core Web Vitals, there's an element of that. People making sure that the quality is there in the website. And that's often difficult because it sits behind the screen. A website can look absolutely fabulous when you're sitting there at a desk in the office, but the performance behind the scenes can often be lacking.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think what gave rise to, the need for, mobile Geddon, as it were, as well, was humans moving from desktops, predominantly over to mobile. But my gut instinct is, I'd be interested to hear what you think, that there's more of a slide now in the future. It will be that we need to get used to coming down the line from Google and other places, but we're unlikely to see a kind of cliff edge kind of change, as it were, again in the future. Maybe we just can't see these things until they arrive.
There's always something. It's the Rumsfeld unknown unknowns. I think I don't anticipate seeing something quite like that anytime soon. I think with the changes that we're seeing now, it's much more quality driven. And unless we go to brain implants and holographics, I don't see the big change that we saw there at the moment.
Voice. I just think there's a lot been talk about voice, and I just wonder whether that's the next big potential kind of issue and threat.
Voice has been bandied as the next best thing for the last 5-6 years. Before that, I mean, I remember in 2000, 1999, around there, people talking about mobile when it was WAP and coming into the phones. Sometimes the buzzwords are there before anything happens. With voice, it's interesting because a lot of that comes from a well-structured quality website and allows the search engines, the smart devices, to pick up that information for those voice searches that are being done. And I think we're in a much more flexible environment now with moving forward. I think there's fewer changes that are going to mean migrations are an absolute must because of a specific thing. I mean, you look back at, just the browser usage over the last 20 years, moving from Internet Explorer 5.5 to 6 or 7 or 8 was absolutely massive.
Yeah.
And I think we're much more flexible now with the devices, with a lot of the apps and software that we use.
Okay, just back to this timeline again before we finalize a couple of these other points here. The timeline, so talent-wise, it would take a bit of time to put in place the right talent, and then we've got a planning period that's going to last, 6 months in the scoping. And then we've got an agency kind of beauty parade period, and then we've got to obviously employ David somewhere along the line as well in that period. I mean, if I was just thinking over the last couple of days ahead of today's call, firms have had a pretty good run on digital marketing for the last few while. I don't know if you know, but only one firm has lost rankings over the last year out of the top 100 law firms. They've all gained rankings.
Yeah.
Right. And good. That's as it should be. But I have I'd posit this. I think now's the right time to be planning for that to happen in 2 years' time.
So my feeling is that, when I started out my career, it was bringing people into digital. I think now it's much more about taking the next big leap. That's what I find. That I'm still working with some firms that are still, the maturity on the digital side is quite low.
Yeah.
But that's moving away now, and it's much more about firms that, okay, we're here, we're in a good position. We've just had 2-3 years of fabulous growth. We want to be up here in 2-3 years' time. What do we need to do now to make sure that's going to happen? And I'm seeing much more forward thinking, and especially within professional services, much more forward thinking. Are we on the right CMS? Is this going to work for us? How is it integrating with other platforms? Does this integrate with other platforms? What does our digital landscape look like in 5 years' time? So yeah, it's much more about the forward planning and much less of the panic of migrations, because I know probably key around the mobile time, there was a lot of real panic of we must do this now. And it was just to get them to be where they could be functional and in a good position as of now. Now I think it's changed to looking much further ahead.
Okay, I like that a lot. Just quickly, because we've slightly overrun for time in terms of this section, I think we are going to throw it open to questions for the group in a minute as well. But any big common or just mistakes that are noteworthy that people make that you just think, please don't do this?
I think, as I say, poor planning, poor strategy. With any project, those are key. I think, it's kind of the usual stuff. It's lack of consultation, late involvement, bringing people in. I mean, especially with areas such as SEO. I mean, I've been brought into projects where people have gone, yeah, we're doing the migration next week, which is always fun. Or even worse, we did the migration 6 months ago and we've only just noticed that our rankings have all tanked. Oh dear, what have we done wrong? Underestimating the scale of the project as well, for both cost and resource, and that should really come out of planning. But it's another one. And then areas such as, scope creep.
Yeah.
This is a really delicate one, because you're often dealing with senior stakeholders who have, they may be on that steering committee that you set up, or they may be very vocal within the business. And it's making sure that people are aware of, we have these milestones, we have these cut-off periods, after which we're not going to be making any changes. And there has to be the buy-in early on that those are set in stone. Scope creep. I mean, I've had senior partners come into the project 2 weeks beforehand and saying, I've got a great idea. I want us to do this. And we've known full well that's another 6 weeks to the project, let alone doing it properly and researching it and all the rest. So yeah, there has to be, basically there's somebody who will sit there and say no.
Which works better then for law firms, Waterfall or Agile as a project management methodology in relation to a website? Please, you're not allowed to say it depends.
It doesn't depend.
Brilliant.
I'm not a fan of either. I'm really keen that people find what works for them, and I don't think pure waterfall or pure agile are the way to go. I think there are elements within migrations that will have a waterfall approach, but there does also need to be the agility within that as well. So, the agile waterfall is, I think, what would work best, and it's also what works best for the business as well.
We have a quick definition of what those two things are, just in case anyone has tendency to understand what their options might be when they engage with an agency as well. So, give me waterfall in 20 seconds. What's that?
Waterfall, the best way I explain it is you have one process after the other. So you do A, you do B, you do C. And it comes from, I think it's the Prince 2 methodology is quite waterfall based. And it can work with some projects. It can work very well for some projects. But I think when it comes to migrations, greater flexibility is needed. Yeah. And that's where the agile side comes in.
Okay, so agile is the ability to tackle smaller elements of the project in bite-sized pieces, complete them, and then look at what's left. And so when we joke about it, we say waterfall, people will suck their teeth and say, oh, that's out of scope. And in agile, they say, oh, we ran out of time. Right. And that's what David is suggesting, I think, is if you can scope as much of it as possible and leave some agility. We used to have a fake phase of 1.5, which was just post-launch. For all of those things that you said that partners would come to you in those last 2 or 3 weeks, and you say, yeah, that's going into phase 1.5, and that would be post-launch. And on the Moscow analysis, it got missed, right, between the must-have, should-have, whatever it might be. And we just said that will be delivered, but it can't be delivered for launch day. And
you're giving away the secrets now.
Well, I don't know. That's only how he did
it. Yeah, I mean, that is what happens. You end up with what's going live now, and well, this is phase 2. And, it's also important, I think, having that, because it makes people realize that, going live isn't the end.
Yeah.
For a start, there's the checks and monitoring that need to continue after that. But I think this is slowly starting to change. But, when a website goes live, it's into a new phase. It's not the end. It's just, there's that chapter, here's the next one. And you need to keep that momentum going. And I think having that phase 2 is a great way to keep that rolling.
I've seen it recently with the Slater and Gordon site, where they have done some continuous improvement to the site post-launch. They did a huge overhaul, as you know. The mega menus are brilliant, very clear on how to get to the services you need from a UX perspective, but they haven't rested on their laurels, David. I've gone and looked again, and they've improved them, and they've made them better. And each time I go back, I learn something new about what they're thinking. And I think it's very data-driven as well. A lot of what they offer up is data-driven, which means it's really customer-driven, because it's like, this is what customers actually want. And I think they've got if you've got a chance, have a look at their site. It's a great blend of what partners want and what clients want, and they've melded it together very well. So they don't need to blow any more smoke, I don't think. So I'm glad I do that regularly enough. Okay, listen, let's bring this section to an end, given it's overrun a little bit as well. David, you're a source of amazing amount of information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to hit stop on this. Anyone who's watching this on the YouTube channel, please do come and join us at the BD Roundtable, simply because you get to join the next section, which is the Q&A, where all the other stuff happens, as it were. We can really
give you all the secrets.
You get all the secrets. All right, David, thank you for that. And I will drop some links in when we share the video so people know how to get in touch with this one.
That's great. Thanks.